All right, guys, so a few people on my YouTube channel have asked me to give more instruction on my guitar builds. Up until now, I've basically been cataloging my builds for myself, but y'all asked, so the first lesson I'm going to do is finishing out this Les Paul Jr. style guitar. Now, the reason I chose this guitar is because it's relatively simple, but it's a little more complicated than a Strat and a Tele. And the other reason is that somebody wants me to build it for them. So, obviously, I have already created the body for the most part. I glued the two pieces of mahogany together and added a maple cap. Pretty easy carpentry. I'll link down below so you can see how that's done. Now, the next step in this process is going to be making the laminated neck. So I need to glue up the lumber before I cut out the neck. The reason I choose a laminated neck is because it's more stable and has less tendency to warp. This neck's going to be 5-piece laminated neck, Wenge, zebra wood, and probably maple. So without further ado, let's make a neck. Okay, so I've got it all clamped up here. It's 2 pieces of Wenge, 2 pieces of maple veneer, and a piece of zebra wood. And everything is clamped on 2 pieces of aluminum extrusions, and that's just to make sure that it's absolutely straight when it's clamped together and it dries, and I don't have a bad center line. Okay, now that we have our laminated neck blank here, roughly shaped, I need to add a truss rod channel to this. Now I'm going to be using a 2-way truss rod, about 18 inches length. This allows us to correct for forward bow and back bow. Pretty easy to line up. First, you want to start here at the break angle of the neck, measure back the width of your nut, and then start your truss rod at that point. So here is about where I will be. And I'll go ahead and zoom here. So, as I mentioned, you want to come back around 5 millimeters. I will use a dial caliper for that. 5 millimeters, okay. And then the next piece I want to mark is this fat part. And I'm going to come all the way to the end and mark the end. Now I would take a 1/4 inch wide cut from these 2 points here where it gets more narrow. And then I will use a 3/8 inch bit to cut this portion. And then I'll continue the 3/8 inch bit into this section for the truss rod access. Now it's important when you're cutting this to follow your arrow. The leading edge of your bit should be pulling your router into your workpiece. So when you're cutting, you want to pull this towards you or the direction of the arrow. If you do it the opposite way, your router has a tendency to drift and will mess up your cut. Okay, so now that we have routed our truss rod channels, we need to make a way to access the nut from the top here. So basically all you have to do is drill a hole that's large enough such that you can fit an Allen key in there. Now you'll want to measure from the bottom of the nut to the center of the nut because it lays flat in the channel, and transfer that same measurement here and drill. You want to use a small drill bit and then get a little bit bigger one and step it up rather than doing one large one at a time. And that's just so you don't break out or blow out this section here. Now this is optional. You don't have to stop your route here and start it again. You could just go right on through and not worry about this. It's just an aesthetic thing and I like the way it looks. Okay, so what I have here is a safety plane, and it's basically kind of like a makeshift planer. It lets me dimension the headstock very easily to the right dimension without too much effort. And it works something like this. So the next step here in making a neck is I need to create a fretboard. Now I have a fretboard blank here with no slots. So I need to add the slots. For that, I have a special saw blade with a very thin kerf on it. I think a 0.3 inch kerf. You can also buy Japanese saws with the same size kerf and do it by hand if you want. But for this operation, I'll use this saw blade and I use this template that has 16th inch notches on them, one for each fret. And then I also use a backing board here. The backing board has a 16th inch pin that's actually side dot material, and that indexes the slots on the jig. Now we'll take the jig, double stick tape it to the fretboard, align it with the slots, and then move it like so for each one. Okay, so now that we have a neck blade done and a truss rod cut, we need a fretboard. So what I have here is the fretboard with a fretboard template on it. This just helps me make it tapered accurate and perfectly every time. I've done this many times where I just simply draw the lines, 42 millimeters at the nut and about 56 millimeters at the 14th fret or so, and cut the lines, tapered it, and then use a long sanding beam to true up the edges. Either way works. This way works for me best. Okay, so what we've done so far is we've laminated a neck blank, cut a shape out of it, added a truss rod channel, added truss rod access, slotted a fretboard and tapered it, as well as started on our body here. Now this concludes this video, but in the next one we are going to cut out the headstock and bind both the fretboard and the headstock, as well as add inlays to the fretboard. So until then, see you later.